Owners of the Hip Homeschool Moms site, and I'm here with Leanne Warren, another co-owner, and we are interviewing Jeannie Fulbright. Jeannie is the author of the Young Explorers Science Curriculum for Apologia. So we are so glad to have you here, Jeannie. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Such a blessing to be here.
Now, we know that you're not just an author, but like us, you're a homeschooling mom. So how long have you homeschooled, and why did you decide to homeschool in the first place?
The funny thing is I didn't know anything about homeschooling, but I lived in this little house, and next door was this older couple, and during the day, when children should be in school, this little girl their granddaughter would come and visit them, and she was just the most mature. She was 10 years old. She was the most mature child. She was more mature than me, and I was 23. And I had a baby, and I just thought, I'd never heard of homeschooling. Actually, I had heard of homeschooling, but I had heard like some kids were homeschooled out in the woods and got into Harvard, with like those kind of crazy stories way back in the day. And so I thought, if this is the kind of person that homeschooling produces, that's what I want for my child. I want the best for her. And so, being a little overachieving mom that I was, she was 2, and I decided to buy my first curriculum. I went to the homeschool store in Dallas. We lived in Dallas. I went to the homeschool store there and bought. The only thing that was available was for kindergarten and up. There was no preschool curriculum like there is now. So I bought her a kindergarten curriculum and started homeschooling her at 2 years old. So I was probably jumping the gun a little bit. That was one of the things I've learned over the years, is that a lot of times we homeschool moms, we get so excited about things that we try to introduce things a little too early because we're excited about learning it. Because really, honestly, what I've discovered is the secret that most people don't understand about homeschooling is that we're giving ourselves the education we didn't get. And that's what keeps us going. That's what keeps us. People are like, how do you do it? How do you do it? And we don't really explain to them, well, we're learning too. We're getting all this information, all this knowledge that somehow, even if you graduated valedictorian of your high school class, you don't remember, or we didn't really learn. I mean, when we were in school, we were learning to memorize for a test, and then once the test was taken, the information which was stored in our short-term memory, poof, was gone. So I kind of got up on a rabbit trail there. Question, how long have I homeschooled? So if you count that, my daughter's going to be 22 in October. If you really count that, which, the government might not count that as real homeschooling, but so that was about 20 years ago. So, I would say 19 years of seriously being a homeschool mom. But, I didn't officially, have to register her with those government entities that we don't really want to be involved in our homeschool until she was 5. But so that's the story of how long and why. And I'm so glad I did, because she became and still is the most wonderful person, and I know that homeschooling had so much to do with that.
Mm-hmm. What about, since you homeschooled from the beginning, what were your biggest challenges in those early years, the early years in the elementary school years?
Well, I would say the biggest challenge, I got caught up so much in making it about the curriculum and about how much we were achieving rather than their character and their heart. And I would say that balancing that and making sure that character and their relationship with God being really the most important thing and the vital parts, it was hard for me to make sure I put that first, and always put that first in every day, because we would get behind, and then I would start worrying, and then I would say, okay, well, we'll do our Bible study tomorrow, and then tomorrow got pushed off. And so for me, the biggest challenge was always remembering that the most important thing is their walk with God, because if they have a strong walk with God, then they are going to be the people God called them to be. And making sure they finished all their curriculum and making sure they get everything done is not what's going to make them all that God called them to be. It's their walk with God, them having their own, I would say, just heart for God. And so just making sure that that was first. And also another thing I really struggled with was thinking that my children needed to be perfect when they were 5 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old. And now that they're all teenagers and grown-ups, it just astonishes me how much I wish I had more grace when they were little. So I would say those are some big challenges as a homeschool mom, because you're with them every day, and so you want them to act like adults because they're your buddies. They're the people you're hanging out with. So a lot of times our expectations can sometimes be a little bit, I would say, too harsh sometimes. So that was a struggle. But God convicted me over and over, and I felt like I got that. He part of homeschooling is about our sanctification. It's about how much we're growing in our relationship with God and our relationship with others. And so that's what He does in all of us.
And that's one thing that I've learned. I've homeschooled for about 18 years now, and it is really hard to let character and godly relationships among siblings and parents and siblings and Bible study. It's hard to put those things first because, like you said, we get so excited about the curriculum. We get so excited about what we're learning along with our children, and it's easy to let that excitement take over and start to put that first instead of our relationship with God and our children's relationships with God. And I've noticed when those things happen, when it gets out of balance, that's when everything kind of goes downhill and nothing works very well anyway. And then I remember, okay, God, I let things get out of balance here. So yes, that is definitely something we all need.
Very good point, because things are not going well and the kids aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing and everybody's crazy, and then we realize that, it's because we don't have the foundation of the Lord guiding and leading us, and the Holy Spirit being our master, not the curriculum. So I agree with you so much.
Right. Okay. Now about the high school years. Yes. But first, let me ask, Leanne, am I echoing?
Yes.
Okay. So what do I do?
I'm not sure. Try unplugging your headset and plug it back in. Sorry, Jeannie.
That's okay.
Okay. Did that fix it?
I don't think so.
I am not sure what to do.
I didn't hear the echo until just now, strangely.
Yes. I agree. Oh, and I hear me echoing too.
I do too, but Jeannie's not echoing. I don't think.
I don't know. Why don't we may have to mute ourselves when while he's talking.
Okay.
And then we'll just ask a question and going.
All right. So just mute myself when I'm not talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
While we talk.
Okay. Sorry about that. All right. So we talked a little bit about the elementary years, the early years. What were some of your biggest challenges as far as the later years, high school ages?
Well, I think high school, the challenges change completely. First of all, you're not doing as much. If you have worked on helping your children to be independent learners, and unless your child has a learning disability, all children by the time they're in high school should be pretty independent with their studies and with their own grading and curriculum and just kind of have ownership of their education. But the the thing that gets more difficult is that it becomes more emotionally challenging, I would say. Whereas when they're little, it's physically demanding and wearying. Whereas when they're older, it's just kind of the emotional turmoil of helping this, this child going through puberty navigate life, and then, of course, navigating the college waters, which has been, I would say, the biggest learning curve for me in high school was figuring out what colleges want, how to best position my children for college acceptance, without making it, without changing our homeschool philosophy of education. So that was a big challenge, but it was actually a lot of fun. It was a little bit navigating the college waters. Where it was a little bit like those early years of homeschooling where you're trying to figure it all out. So I really enjoyed. I actually enjoyed that. It was like my new learning curve. So.
Do you have any tips or anything?
Absolutely. I'm actually, interestingly enough, because I've found that there's a lot of misinformation rampant in the homeschool community, mostly because a lot of information is outdated. The ways that you get into college now, what colleges want to see now, is different than it was, I would say, 5-10 years ago. And so they kind of, you got to learn what the hoops are and where they are, where they're placed, and how to jump through them. But the hoops have changed. And so a lot of times we give information out that isn't actually accurate today. And so what I did is me and my assistant, we called lots and lots, I can't give you an exact number, we called colleges all over the country, from the East Coast to the West Coast, and up and down, and called top schools and hard to get into schools, and then average school, and all levels of schools, and basically we compiled what they were saying about homeschoolers, and it was, a lot of it was different from place to place, but there was a lot that was the same. And so what I have done is I'm compiling a manual called College Yes You that will not only guide the student, and it's actually for the student because most admissions manuals are written for parents, so this is for students, and it's just essentially going to guide the student into keeping records and keeping up with their move towards college in high school, and also we'll have a personality test in there that will help the child see what careers would actually be best suited for them, so that they, some personalities really are not designed to be a lawyer. But everybody wants to be a lawyer when they're a kid, because I can argue, or whatever it is. But honestly, not every personality is suited to be a lawyer. And so this will help kids to kind of get more of a picture of what careers would actually be more fulfilling for them. And then essentially it talks about rigor and challenge. Colleges nowadays are more interested in the challenge of the courses the student took. And of course they need to take the minimum requirements, but they want to see some challenging courses, and because that that just shows to them that the student is really, really interested in learning, and that's going to translate to a good college student in their mind. They're trying to figure out what's going to translate to a good college student, and they have found that students that took rigorous and challenging courses in high school, elected to do that, courses they didn't have to take. For example, you have to take algebra, geometry, and algebra 2 to get into college, but to take an extra math class beyond that is taking a challenging, they would consider that a more rigorous advanced course. And you need to have biology and physical science. Well, if you add chemistry onto that, that's considered an advanced course. And if you have 4 advanced sciences, that just looks better. And so colleges are more interested in your courses on the transcript than they are your SAT grades, and especially extracurriculars. And those extracurriculars and SAT grades, those things can definitely help with scholarship money, because that's where scholarship money is earned, is through when you fill out the little application. They want to see all that your child did throughout their high school career, and volunteer work, and all that stuff looks great on the scholarship applications. and also on the college applications. But really, it's about what classes you took in high school. And most homeschoolers are taking, they're going above the basics. And so I don't think that that's a problem. But one thing with homeschoolers is college admissions counselors, especially if they have never met a homeschooler, or they're kind of, maybe they were just hired, they change all the time. And so you might have a college admissions counselor who just realizes homeschoolers are really amazing, and then they move up the ladder at the university, and you get a new admissions counselor that knows nothing about homeschoolers. And so one thing that's helpful is to make sure that your child in high school takes maybe a dual enrollment course where they actually have a real teacher who has deadlines, and they can actually see, okay, this kid can handle college class, this kid can handle college level material, can handle turning in work, this kid is capable. And so I think for homeschoolers, dual enrollment is helpful on the transcript. And of course, because the SATs are used by colleges to give scholarship money, taking a good SAT prep course is worth the investment, because and most states have state scholarships, but even if you don't, colleges will give, for example, Liberty University gives full tuition scholarship at a certain level of the SAT, and every score like about 100 points below that, you get less money, but they give money based on your SAT scores. So it's a good investment.
What's the name of that resource?
It's called College Yes You, and I hope to have it out by the spring.
Okay, good. I'm glad you told us about that. So, speaking of college, your daughter is starting her last year of college, and then you have a son who will be moving across the country. So, will you be an empty nester then?
Not yet. No, I still have two at home, but one of my children at home will be in 11th grade, and he's going to be doing dual enrollment. Hopefully, that will be all he does for 11th grade, because that would just make it easy. But yeah, he's my oldest son is moving. He's going to Pepperdine University in California, and so he's going to be a really long way away. But I think it'll be good for him, because he's going to have to learn to do laundry. He'll be good. I mean, he's been asked. He says he knows how to do laundry, and he's been asked to do laundry. But I think that his sisters, probably do a lot of it for him.
What advice would you have, or what would you say to parents who think that they need to send their children to school instead of homeschooling for those high school years?
I would say that homeschooling is a far better option for homeschooling high school, because you can tailor their education to their unique talents and gifts, and they can spend that time. There's so much more free time in homeschooling through high school. There's so much more free time that they can pursue whatever their passion is and become a virtual expert in their passion before they even go off to college. They will become so much more knowledgeable about the things that they're interested in. And I just believe that that if we put them in kind of that sort of like, I consider public school sort of like a manufacturing plant where everybody has to get the same thing and the same level and the same and it's all about the test scores and all about the grades. It's really not about what you've learned or whether you've learned. So that's really, I would say that's the wrong approach. And I believe that you can actually position your child to get into a better college if you have control over the child's high school education, and your child has control over their education and ownership over their education, rather than putting it into the hands of an entity that doesn't really care about you. You may have a teacher here or there that cares about you, but the entity itself does not care what happens to you once you leave. All they care is that you graduate.
Yeah. All right, let's go back to your earlier years homeschooling. And when you developed what is now called the Young Explorer series, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started with that, how you got the idea, and how you began to put those together?
Yes, absolutely. Well, there wasn't a lot of resources when I started homeschooling, and I know you remember those years. There was just a few curriculum companies out there, and I had my son. I started homeschooling my son after I'd been homeschooling my daughter for a while. She's almost 3 years older than my son, and then he just kind of needed a little more time to play in the dirt before I started formal schooling with him. But when I brought him in to start formal schooling, he wanted to learn all about space. And so I thought, oh, that's awesome. I want to learn about space too, because, you know, this is all about my education too. So I went to the library and got 23 books on space and sat down on the couch, gathered the kids around, and I started reading these books to my, he was probably 5 or 6. My daughter at that point was, you know, older, but she was sitting beside me and she was reading along. And of course, I'm having to edit out, you know, billions and billions of years. And of course, it's different in every book how long ago it was or what caused it. And I'm just editing it out, and she is looking, and she's a real perceptive, smart girl, and she was looking at the, you know, me reading, and she asked me, why aren't you reading that part? I was like, because it's not true. And then she was like, how do you know it's not true? Like, because we're Christians and because it's not, because I didn't have an answer. And I thought, okay, because the Bible says it's not true. But she just, you know, she's kind of an intellectual, and so she was just, I could just see her little brain like clicking away, like, okay, a scientist who knew wrote this book, but you are not a scientist and you don't know. And so it was kind of like I just knew what was going on, the little spores of doubt, you know, that could easily be planted. And I thought, you know what? And not only that, that was the first problem I found, but it was, the books were beautiful. They had beautiful colors and lots of just beautiful pictures, but they were so boring to read. They were just written by, I don't know who wrote those books. They were just really hard to swallow, just, you know, facts and data, just like a public school textbook might be. And so I thought, and then my son's eyes, my son who wanted to learn about space was just like, I'm done. Like, well, don't you want to keep learning about space? Nah, I don't want to learn about space anymore. Like, I have 20 more books here. You know, and it was like, kind of, I realized at that point that using those resources where it's just the spewing of information was actually it kind of killed his interest. It killed his desire to learn, and he didn't want to learn about space anymore. And I thought, okay, this cannot. Okay, first of all, I know there's got to be something else out there that teaches about space. So I went and found it that does it from a creationist standpoint. At that point, there was one astronomy book on space, astronomy book from a creation standpoint, and I bought it. And but it was not written, you know, at a 5-year-old level. It was not written in a way that a 5-year-old could grasp the information or really think about it and mull over it and giving just the imparting of ideas to a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old. And so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to write a little astronomy book myself. And just, you know, I thought this is just going to be just for my, you know, my kids. And during that time, of course, that was that time in our generation when the internet had become huge, and so there were all those chat rooms that we used to go into, and, you know, and yeah, those Yahoo groups and all the e-loops and everything. And so I was just kind of telling people, oh, you know, I wrote a chapter on Saturn today. And people were like, well, can you sell? Can we buy? Can you send it to us? Can we buy it from you? And I thought, yeah, I mean, because I was writing it using the methodologies that I was using as a homeschool mom, and I was a very eclectic, kind of free-spirited, you know, like, let's get a book on George Washington, and we'll notebook that book, and we'll narrate that book, and then we'll act out that book, and, you know, we were just kind of, you know, I was making it up as I went along. So I was writing this curriculum, and I wrote it using the methodologies that I found to be more effective in my homeschool, which was the notebooking and the just, doing something project activity-wise afterwards to really reinforce what we learned, and the narration. And so people wanted it, and I thought, okay, well, I will. I'll just find out how much it is to print the book. And I wanted it to be full color because, I was not going to have something less than those library books had. I wanted it to be nice, and so I ended up printing it and selling it for like a few dollars more than I printed it for, and it ended up where people started finding out about it. Homeschool stores, Nature's Workshop Plus found out about it, and so they wanted to sell it, but they were going to have to mark it up to sell it, and so I kind of did a print run for them, and then I ran out, and my husband was like, honey, your little project here, we got to, we're losing a lot. Every time you sell a book, we lose money. So can we not do this anymore? And I thought, I was so upset. I was just destroyed. I was just like, oh, this is my ministry, and how can I've got to, there's got to be a way. And Nature's Workshop Plus had been calling me, and I had been avoiding their phone calls because I couldn't print any more books. I didn't have any more. I knew why they were calling me, and I was like, I can't tell them, and I'm not going to give them any more books, but I needed to tell them. But anyway, finally, one day, I answered the phone without looking at caller ID because I was just busy or whatever, and it was Nature's Workshop Plus. I was like, oh. And then, so he said, well, why can't you, people love this astronomy book. And at that point, it was called the Young Christian's Book of Astronomy. And it was almost identical to what is out right now. But what happened was he said, well, I actually have a friend and an associate that's a publisher that's looking to publish an elementary science curriculum. And I said, oh, okay. And so he sent Jay Weil my book, and Jay called me up and said, I'd love to publish your book, and I'd like you to write some more. And I said, well, that's great because I've already written a botany book. And so we just the relationship started, and that. And it was literally because my son wanted to learn about space. And that's how these things happen. God uses so many interesting circumstances to bring about His will in our lives.
I thought years ago when my children were smaller, they're all teenagers now, and my son was interested in space. And I found your book, and I thought, I'm not interested in learning about space, but I'll do it because he wants to do it. And what was so surprising was I loved it. I had just as much fun learning that material along with him as he had learning it. Because when I was in school, science was pretty boring. It just was not fun.
That's so true. I think a lot of times we get afraid. Homeschool parents are afraid to teach science because they weren't given a good science education. And what we want to encourage new homeschoolers to understand is that you're gonna learn along with your child, and it's gonna be the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, that was the unexpected. That was one of the big things for me, is I had no idea, one, how much I would love some of these subjects I really did not like at all when I was in school. And two, I had no idea how much I would learn that either I never learned before or that I learned it.
Exactly.
I have a question for you about how you use your science series. I know some parents use it who have younger kids, kindergarten, first, second, third grade, and then others might be fourth, fifth, sixth grade. Do you have suggestions for the parents of those younger children versus the middle school children, practical things about how you would actually go about using your books with those students?
Well, I always tell people, I know we provide notebooking journals and all of these things we've created to accompany, and people create experiment kits as well to help make it easier, which I think is wonderful and fantastic. But for me, I just want to encourage people that giving your child a good science education is really about bringing the subject to life and making sure that they are enjoying what they're learning and that that it's fun for them. Because as soon as we start making school a drudgery, we start killing their love for learning. And so I would not require your child to do anything they don't want to do when they're learning science, except for to read and narrate. I had this one mom email me, and she said, we did your astronomy book 3 years ago. And she was giving me a little testimony, and she said, my daughter was playing a board game with her friends the other day, and the question on the board game was how many Earths fit inside the sun, and she knew the answer, and the answer was wrong on the board piece, and she knew it, and she said, let's go look it up, and they looked it up, and she was correct because she remembered the information that she had learned from my books 3 years before. And I said, oh my goodness, that is such a great testimony, like really learning retention, like what's the point of teaching them if they don't learn it or remember it? You know, we want them to remember what they're learning and to enjoy it. I said, so did you do all the activities? Did you do all the experiments? Did you do the notebooking? She said, oh, actually, we just read the book and did the narration. And I thought, okay, I mean, doing the other stuff is great, and it's fun, and it gives your child more time that they're mulling over the subject when they're you know, drawing or writing, whatever it is, that's really helping even more to solidify it and take it from that short-term memory into the long-term memory. But honestly, truly, if it's just easier for you and your family to just read the book and narrate, close the book and go on to the next subject, but having enjoyed and been interested and fascinated in what you learned, that to me is giving your child a great science education. And so I would say don't ever make it too hard for them. Don't ever make it a drudgery, because you're not, even though we provide all these materials for the super motivated kid or the super creative kid or the kid who wants to do all the experiments, we provide those things for them, but that's not what is necessary to give your child a really great solid science foundation. It really is just about imparting knowledge to them. And so doing that in a way that makes it fun and interesting and delightful is, I would say, the first goal that you should have when you're giving your child, especially elementary kids who are just hungry for knowledge. We don't want to squelch that by making it harder than it needs to be for them. And so every child is different. So really, I would say the child who loves to draw, let them just draw. The child who loves experiments, do the experiments. You know, make it easy. Get the kit. Do whatever it is that you need to do. The child who does not want to write, does not want to draw, but it is willing to do the narration and willing to, that's fine. That would be fine. So I would say every child's different. Every child's a different kind of person. Every child's a different learner. They like, you know, they're in high school. That's why I would say homeschool through high school, because your child you can tailor their education to their learning style. So I wouldn't force anything unpleasant when teaching science, because really you're just trying to ignite that passion and love for learning in them. So that would be my most, I would say, important advice. As far as the way the books are written, obviously I wrote the astronomy book when my children were little, and so I explained, and also astronomy is not as heavy of a subject as, say, Zoology 3. So there's a lot more explanation in the first two books that I wrote. I would say for if your oldest child is a kindergarten first or maybe kindergarten or first grader, I would go with astronomy, botany, or Zoology 1 or Zoology 2, because those subjects I would say are not as difficult to tackle. I'm sorry, 1 second. I have to tell my daughter to pick up my other daughter. Heather, can you pick up Gigi? She needs to be picked up. Thanks. Sorry. I just got a text. So, real life. Anyway, real life happened. So anyway, so I would say the subject of chemistry and physics is really fun, and all the experiments are really fun. I mean, you make a smoke bomb, and you do, you make a periscope where you can look, behind the couch and look at everything that's going on. There's cool things to do. Younger kids would love, but if your youngest child is in kindergarten or first, chemistry and physics would probably be better to wait till later so that when they can understand the concept of positive and negative energy fields and that sort of thing and friction. And so I would say the chemistry and physics and anatomy and physiology, I would wait until your oldest child is a little bit older. Now, of course, the younger children, if you have an oldest child that's in 4th grade and you're doing anatomy, the 4th grader is going to understand more than the kindergartner, but keep the kids together. Make sure you're giving them all, letting them learn together, lifestyle learning, family learning, because you can do things together, and it's a lot more fun, and it's great homeschool memories.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about immersion learning.
Okay, yes. Well, the Third International Math and Science Study, which was a huge study internationally on science and math achievement for students in all the first world countries, this study was done in, I think, 2011, I believe, and they've done it several years. This was not the first time they did it. And they found that that American school children were scoring at the bottom on international assessments for math and science. And so they were trying to explore why countries like Japan were scoring so high, that their kids by 8th and 12th grade knew so much more than American school children. And so they studied the curriculum, and they found that in Japan and in Finland and some of these other countries, the school had more autonomy over the curriculum, and they would spend more time on one subject and go deeper into each subject, rather than giving them little bits of information, just here's, this is a flower, this is a petal, this is a stem, and next year, this is it gets pollinated, and they don't explain how the process works, and nobody understands, and it's this big mystery. And then by the time the kid learns how pollination works, they're so bored with plants. So they found that these countries that were scoring so high is actually they were teaching children more in depth than American school children. And they said the American curriculum was a mile wide and an inch deep. And so I knew just from being a homeschool mom that when we dove into a subject, we really understood it so much better. When we spent more time really delving into the entire, when we studied history, we dove into the ancient history. We dug around and learned so much, but we came away with a real understanding, a confidence in what we knew, and a confidence in our knowledge of ancient history. And so I believed, at that time, I didn't know about the Third International Math and Science Study, but I believed that my children would know more and understand more and learn more if they immersed themselves in the subject that we were learning, and we go deep, truly deep, so that we leave no stone unturned, that they truly understand it and come away with a profound knowledge of the subject. And so the concern at first was, well, how are they going to do on these tests? In Georgia, homeschoolers have to do a test every 3 years, the standardized test. And so, and my thing was, who cares, really? It's about what they're learning, and eventually they're going to surpass all those kids, even if they didn't learn chemistry until, 5th grade or 6th grade. And so, that was my philosophy, but I'm kind of a rebel. So, a lot of homeschool moms are, so that's good, or at least they were, back in the early days when we just really had to, blazing the trails that were coming behind the true trailblazers. But nevertheless, I started getting emails from people saying, my child's always scored really poorly in science when we used the spiral approach curriculums that were being presented by, that were available at the time, which touched on different subjects and tried to teach a lot of stuff that the child didn't really truly grasp or not know or couldn't memorize. It was about memorizing information. And they said, after using your curriculum for 2 years, this one mom sent me an email and said, after using your curriculum for 2 years, my child, who was scoring below average on her standardized test, which she had to give them every year, I think she just wanted to, but essentially her child was in 3rd grade and scored at the 10th grade level after only doing astronomy and botany. And so I started really trying to understand, how is that possible? How could the child, because I doubt very much astronomy or botany was covered on the standardized test for a 3rd grader. And then what I realized after kind of exploring the situation is that so much of science is deduction and inference, and all of science kind of translates to the different science fields. And if you're really teaching a subject in depth, for example, if you teach the correct terminology for a flower, you talk about the ovary that houses the ovules and how the pollination allows the seeds to grow, and you give them the correct terminology, then that really actually translates to zoology and other things in biology. And so they have kind of a broad understanding. By understanding one field deeply, they can make accurate guesses and deduce the right answer on other science fields. And so I believe we give our children a better science education, a more, I would say, significant confidence in their ability to handle scientific topics if we go deep into one field and truly explore everything and give them a sound grounding in that field of science, and that translates to understanding other fields of science quite easily.
I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your notebooks that go along with your curriculum, and if you would, give us some information about the ones for younger students and the ones for older students, and maybe the ages that you recommend or the grade levels and how you use those.
Okay, so we created the notebooks. A lot of people asked for them, and I realized we didn't have them at first. In fact, we just had people just create your own notebook, and we found that was kind of, especially with a subject like science, which is really hard to get to if it's not easy. If it's not easy for the mom to just make it happen, it's going to get left behind, because we have to teach reading and we have to teach math, and we have to, these things are, subjects that are, required. I mean, not that science isn't required, but I did know that we needed to make it easy. And so that's why we decided to go ahead and create the notebooking journals, to make it easy for the mom to have one place when I say, okay, now that you've learned everything there is to learn about the Earth, create an advertisement to sell the Earth to another planet, explaining all the great features of the Earth and why somebody would want to buy our planet. And so this is a notebooking activity that the child uses to kind of increase the retention and remind them of the things they found interesting about the Earth, and they don't have to say every single feature that they learned that makes the Earth a unique planet. But what they would do is they would just create the little advertisement and put the things that they thought were cool about the Earth and why somebody would want to buy it. But what we did is, with the notebooking journal, is we have a page where they can turn to. In fact, at the beginning of the notebooking journals, you have the reading and then the activity and a little page number, so they know which page. They just open up the Earth page where it says advertisement of the Earth, and they can create their little advertisement there. Now, for the regular journal and the junior journal, it's exactly the same. However, what's different is when I ask things like to write something or to create something. For the junior journals, we have primary lines, which are the lines with the little dots, the little dashes in between, so that they can create, they can write a label or write. They just have less writing. It has less. It's not as overwhelming for them as far as how many lines there are and how much they have to write. And so I would say for a child who is not yet proficient with forming letters and keeping things straight, the junior journal is a great way to reinforce what you've taught them in writing and also allow them to express themselves without it being too overwhelming. And so we created the junior journals that have different activities. Like, for example, we have vocabulary crosswords in the regular journals, so that they can the student can kind of do a little crossword to try to remember the vocabulary words. Well, some of the vocabulary words are really challenging, and maybe just a 5-year-old, 7-year-old doesn't need to know those vocabulary words. They don't need to be reinforced in them. The concepts were big enough. So we have fewer vocabulary words, and we have different activities that they can do, like cut out a little puzzle and put the words together with the puzzle pieces, and it's just a little more hands-on, the dexterity, with those early years, you're still trying to help them get a little bit more hand control, and so they have more activities that are designed to that you would typically have for a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, and so I would say age-wise, it's just really going to depend on your child. If your child is a delayed learner, then you might use the junior journal longer. If your child's super advanced and came out of the womb writing, then get the regular journal. So it's just really going to. I know that's not a definitive answer. I would say for a typical family, 3rd grade is about the age that I would get the regular journal. For girls, maybe, and 4th grade for boys. But only because boys tend to hate writing, and you may have a boy that loves writing and a girl that hates it. So it's just it's really about you and your family, and you just knowing your children and what's going to be more enjoyable for them. That's the key.
So do you suggest, for example, my son never did like writing. Do you suggest working with your child and kind of doing the activities, the notebooking, the puzzles, crossword puzzles, and all those sorts of things together?
Sure, absolutely. And again, it's really about what they're reading and what they're enjoying, what they're reading, and spending time with it. And a child who really doesn't like to draw or write, I recommend doing different activities as far as conveying what they've learned, either not doing them, and or doing like have them print up pictures and cut them out and glue them in their notebooking journal. I've seen that done a lot. And then the child could create a PowerPoint or do things where they're not having to write, and we do want them to get the the skill of writing, and that's done in other ways, and I just don't think we need to make science about writing unless they're already writing. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, it sure does. I would like to know what you think as far as setting the pace for using your books.
Okay.
Do we like to do a certain amount each day, or set a goal for the week, or how would you suggest that parents go about doing that?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that. I was, like I said, I'm a little bit of a free spirit, so I, basically would sit down and we would read until we weren't interested in it anymore, or we were just ready to move on. So, kind of like when their eyes glaze over, we stop reading, or just, or when I could tell they weren't listening anymore. And I know that's not how everybody does their homeschool, but that is definitely how we did it. And so I didn't at first have a schedule. So what we did is in the notebooking journals, I had a schedule. A friend of mine who is my editor, she's a scheduler. She likes to schedule things and have things scheduled. So she was perfect to create the schedules for the notebooking journal, for the entire curriculum. So she created a schedule, a reading schedule that has it broken down by 2 days a week. And so some people are doing science every day, some people are doing science 4 days a week. So it would just really depend on how you do it, whether that schedule is going to work for you. But if you would be willing to do science 2 days a week, that schedule is all written out exactly for you. So I'm not a planner. I'm just not an organized person like that. So, so I really can't give great advice on how to do that, because we would maybe just only do science that whole day kind of thing. We're just those kind of homeschoolers, or not do science at all. So, but so I would say just there's a really good schedule, and take that schedule if you're going to do it more often, and just see if you can break it down into, okay, well, you know what, won't do this notebooking activity until this day. We'll do the reading one day and the notebooking the next day, or whatever it is that that you think works for your family, but there is a schedule in there for you schedule people.
What do you think about assessment?
What do you think about assessment?
My daughter
loves
science. She likes to read through the books and do some of the notebooking activities and the experiments. But if I ask her, okay, I want you to read this list of questions and answer them, she hates that. So what we did a lot was we would just discuss them instead of having her write the answers down, that sort of thing. Do you think for older elementary students something like that's okay?
I definitely do. Absolutely. Especially in elementary school. Absolutely. In fact, my daughter, she really didn't. I mean, what happened was she went into the older science courses, not mine, but the next levels up, and she kind of did it the way the curriculum was written, and so she made straight A's, hundreds on every single one of the tests that they had at the end of every chapter. She did really, really well, and at the end of the course, I opened up the book and I started asking her questions from the book, questions from some of the tests that she had taken. She couldn't remember a thing. So the next year, for the next science course, instead of doing the tests, we did lap books, and then I would have her also just write, because it wasn't really, we weren't counting it for high school, so we didn't have to use the assessment, but eventually through the rest of high school, I had her write, basically notebook her science, and her lab books and everything was all notebooking, and so it was essentially she wasn't doing the tests and the assessments that they were asking, and so we never really did it that way. We never did tests and assessments for her, and she's graduating magna cum laude from University of Georgia, and so you don't have to test your child for them to be able to be successful in college. You really don't. So, I mean, they have to take the tests to get into college, but but really it's not. It's just about helping them just learn the material and what's the best way to make this information, theirs, their own.
I have one question. Jeannie, since you're here, I just found out today that my son has a vision problem, and so we're looking at audios. So can you talk a little bit about the audios?
Yes, we created the audios, and we have audios for everything except for astronomy and botany, which those will be out as well. We're going to be working on those. But the audios are essentially I'm reading the books to the child, and we have I don't read the experiments in there. So the child, if you want to do the experiments, you'll need the textbook. I recommend having the textbook because I'll say, look at the picture on page 58. And then the way in the book it'll say, look at the picture on the right, and I change it to say, look at the picture on page 58, so that the child can stop the recording and turn to page 58 in the textbook and look at the picture while I describe whatever it is I'm describing in the actual textbook. So really I do kind of change the textbook in reading when I'm reading it, because I do give you that little tip, like, okay, you can turn to this page, and then I'll say, okay, now do the activity on page 224. And so then they know, okay, well, now we're going to stop the thing, we're going to go to page 224 and do that little activity there, or whatever it is. So I make it easy for someone to have the textbook but not have to follow along with the textbook. You can listen to it in the car, and you can do the activities when you get home, or you can listen to it on vacation and not do the activities at all, but it's just reading the book and try to make it sound as animated as I felt when I was writing it. So yes, so the audios are out there for those of you who need them, and some kids need audios. I mean, it just really, I loved using audios. I mean, I loved that audiobooks when my kids were young. It was just wonderful. It was interesting for me because then I could rest my voice, but and I know it's really helpful for those students who do have vision problems or learning disabilities and autism and all kinds of learning disabilities. The audios are really helpful for them.
We're really excited about it.
Yay!
Okay, I have a question that's maybe a little fun. What was your favorite book in the series to write?
My favorite book to write was definitely zoology too. That's because it's the swimming creatures, all the ocean animals and the animals of the lakes and rivers. But I loved that book the most because I love the beach. So I got to go to the beach a lot and call it a work trip, and it was really interesting the way that God works. And this is kind of a tragic thing that happened, but Hurricane Isaac, I believe it was, came off the coast of Florida and washed a bunch of the sea creatures from the middle of the Gulf of Mexico and down. I would say some of these creatures came straight from the Caribbean, and they were washed up on the beach in Florida where we vacation, and I got so many of the pictures that are in the book from that vacation. And I was writing the book at the time, and I would see these little brittle stars crawling, and you would never, I've never seen that before. I didn't realize even then how incredible of an opportunity it was that God gave that to us as we were learning about it, that they were all there for me to photograph. But it was a real blessing. It was just kind of one of those special things that Hurricane Isaac was horrible. It really was. But there was good that came out of that, so I was really happy. But that was my favorite book to write for sure because I love the beach and love ocean creatures.
Did you do most of your own photographs for the books, or did you have other people help with that? How did that part work?
I did a lot of my own photographs, but for some of them more like a whale and that sort of thing, we definitely used stock photography. And for the birds, one of our homeschool friends was an ornithologist, and so he took a lot of the bird photos, and he was also very interested in entomology, so we had a lot of insect photos that he did. So that was, God always provided. It was really, really cool how that happened.
So let's see, I believe maybe the most recent book is the Anatomy and Physiology, is that right?
It's chemistry and physics.
Chemistry and physics. Will there be any more in the series, or do you think this is complete?
I don't think there will be any more in the series. There's a couple of topics that I didn't cover, and that's meteorology and geology, which is sad because my dad is a geologist. But geology is covered really well in this general science book, and I think meteorology is covered there as well, pretty well touched on. However, I think the Apologia might have plans for not elementary, but to make sure that that's an understood topic.
So are there the notebook and journals for all of your series?
Yes, there are notebook and journals for everything.
Let's see, we're just got a few minutes left. Is there anything you'd like to tell us that maybe we didn't ask you about?
Anything that I would like to tell you? Well, this College SU series that I'm creating, it's actually going to be a series. My daughter is writing it with me, and we're going to actually create a book that gives you tips on how to be successful in college. There's like little tips and tricks, because my husband knew a lot of them. I wish that I had known when I was in college, that he taught to my kids, because he has ADHD and really had to use specific little tools, but it ended up those tools help my daughter, who's not ADHD, to be an A+ student, and also just little things that will help you become that college graduate that gets the job, that gets any job you want, that doesn't graduate without a job. So there's a lot of little tools for that. So we're going to create that. I'm also going to create a book on scholarships, divided up by how you get it. For example, essay scholarships. The way you get it is by writing an essay for kids who like to write essays. Video scholarships. There's a lot of scholarships available for if you make a video, and you have to make a video on this or that, or different topics. And so I'll have it broken up that way, because I think that's just easier than trying to wade through all the scholarships that are available and try to read every single one of them. It'll be broken down to what your child is good at doing, and then they can get more money for college that way. And And I think we're also going to create some books that will help a child know exactly what to do for each career that they want. Like, for example, if you want to be a doctor, here's what you should do to do that. If you want to be a lawyer, here are the tips and tricks from, you know, junior high through college, you know, to get into law school and, you know, that sort of thing. So that's the plan.
Leanne, did you have anything else that you wanted to ask before we close?
I think that's it.
Yay!
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I apologize for the feedback problem, but we really enjoyed it, and we're so glad you could be here with us.
Thank you. It's been awesome. It's been wonderful talking to y'all and meeting y'all.
It's wonderful meeting you too.